You mentioned Daniel James and the fact that he went to Dignitas and that his parents had suffered unbearably. But isn't that slightly disingenuous that there is somewhere that they could go and they did, and his decision was to end his life in Switzerland, but that we wouldn't want to offer the same thing here? Okay. I'm not saying that we would want to, but you seem to sympathise with their position that they did take him there.
Sure. I mean, you know, I think that as a parent, when you see your child suffering, what you would do for your child suffering, you may break the law. You know, I can understand parents who would attack somebody who was attacking their child. It would be against the law, but I completely understand that emotional response. The problem is with changing the law is what are the consequential effects of changing the law. Sadly, in the whole spectrum of society, there will always be sad, hard cases. But the law as it operates to allow for that, because it says, this is the law, this is the clear line drawn. It's a bright line. If you cross it, you will be answerable for your actions, and we will look at you and see what we do. But we're not locking up everybody, because we're saying, but actually one can understand the extremists of the situation they found themselves in. Other regimes around the world don't take that view. They say if you're caught thieving, you know, that's it. You may have your hand chopped off or whatever. We don't do that here. We say that each case is looked at. We look differently if you look at theft. We don't say ahead of time how much you can steal before you're prosecuted. But we know that if somebody steals and they've completely run out of money because their benefits haven't come through and they haven't got anything and they've stolen some food because they've got their child, we would look at that quite differently to somebody who goes into the jeweller's with a gun and empties the window of the gold and diamonds. And we would expect the courts to view them differently.
I'm a teacher and I don't know anything about what I would do in a situation where I had a bereaved pupil. How would I go about actually learning what to do and learning those kinds of skills?
Jane Fitz is the retired headmistress who's been doing this work for us. And the plan through this year is that we get her starting to work with the education department and set up some very, very simple training of a kind of toolkit type training that can go into inset days and so on, because basically you've got to have something which is really simple and at your fingertips. I would have to say that, you know, heaven forbid it happens tomorrow, because it would be tragic for you to be here tonight and have a problem in your class in the coming week. If you contact Crews, they have bereavement support in all of the boroughs of Wales. They are the only service that has bereavement support across the whole of Wales. Failing that, if you had difficulty getting through to Crews, if you go on the website and look up bereavement services for children in Wales, the hospice in Wrexham will give you some pretty good advice. The Tigabaith, which is the children's hospice in North Wales, and works with Hope House. It's a branch of Hope House, and Tigabaith is the Welsh bit. Absolutely superb. And they have also bailed the police out in North Wales, and I'll tell you that story in a moment. But otherwise, if you're stuck, contact your local specialist palliative care team, who should be able to give you a steer and know who might be able to give you some support and things to do. As a kind of basic toolkit, number one is clear, simple messages. Quite open, quite honest, acknowledging what's happened, acknowledging the grief, acknowledging that the child needs private space at times to be able to choose when they dip in and out of it. Acknowledging that their behaviour may be difficult at times and they may be struggling, and that's okay, and help them learn that rather than go off being with all that emotion that's sloshing around, to come and sit down, perhaps have a private area even in the classroom, somewhere that they can have as a little refuge, or something they can do, or someone they can go to trigger that they actually need time out and they're finding it difficult, and make sure that all of the staff who may be encountering that child know what's happened. Every single one of them, from the school caretaker, you know, the lollipop lady, everybody knows, not to broadcast it and gossip, but just so that they can acknowledge with that child. And the other thing that's really helpful are the sort of rituals around, which is perhaps that the other children in the class might draw a card to say that they're sorry for this, that this child's lost mummy or daddy, and that you might mark it at the beginning of, you know, the first lesson, perhaps if they've been off, and when they come back, they would be welcomed back. Just, you know, 1 minute of just acknowledging this has happened, and it's great to have them back in school. So that you normalise it and you help them put boundaries around it. You give them some boundaries so they can escape into an area and they can come back out and be with their peers without feeling stigmatised. There was a case a few years ago where a man murdered his wife and shot himself. They'd recently moved to North Wales. The police had the 2 small children, nobody known to the family, and in desperation phoned Tigabaith. And Tigabaith said, bring the mother's body here, we will tell the children and help them understand what has happened. And they got a sort of cold room, which is normally where children, called the Starlight Room, where children who've died are laid down. And they brought the mother's body there, and Tigabaith just stepped up to the plate. Family they never knew before, but they had staff who are not frightened of talking to children around death. And it's really, people are frightened, it's the adults that are the problem.
And also a highly emotive way of addressing it, but with Dr. Martin, I was offended by the way in which he monopolised choice, apparently. The thing that I found most challenging was the fact that he expressed it in terms of being a Christian compassion. And I did find that highly problematic, and I'm just wondering if you had any thoughts on how the Christian leadership in Wales should perhaps respond or reflect on that discernment of what he did.
Right. I think that actually it'll be the courts that pass judgment. It's not us. So, you know, we don't know the facts of the case. We only know what's been in the media. So it's our reactions. And I hope when I was talking, I've made that clear. That's my reaction to what I've seen in the media, not that I'm saying what should happen. And it hit the media because he'd just been struck off by the General Medical Council. I think there is an issue, though. The churches, all of them, denominations, religions, whatever, are there to set a standard. They are there to set a moral standard and a moral code. And I do worry when it goes a bit fluffy and soft around the edges that they just don't quite know where they're going and haven't thought through the consequential arguments. My own view is that actually there is a place for a very clear message in society, and those who don't go along to any of the churches and don't subscribe to any of the religions, that's fine. But the church has got a role. If it's not going to take a role, I mean, you know, in Christianity we have the 10 Commandments, and those really kind of form the basis. And we know people transgress all the time, particularly over the adultery one, you know, but they transgress, but the basic message is there. The church takes a very compassionate, forgiving view, and now we'll let people marry, and we've got civil partnerships for people who are in same-sex relationships, and I was a great supporter of that bill going through and campaigned for that bill to go through, partly because as well as it giving permission, it actually provided protection. It provided protection to the partner when one died, and that was really important because there were people who were landing up being pretty destitute because of the way the law was written before.